Hello friends and welcome to the channel. I have about 100 hours of gameplay as of the time of recording this video in the First Descendant, and I have definitely made a few mistakes along this journey. And in this video, I really want to try to clear some differences up on how our characters kind of gain power so that you don't make the same investment mistakes that I have. And really, I'm going to be using two characters to kind of showcase what the differences between the skill power and the skill power modifiers are, because I think at this point we all know that some of the tooltips and descriptions in this game are very lackluster or just kind of confusing to follow. So with all of that said and out of the way, let's head right over to the laboratory. Alright, so now that we're in the lab, once again, I'm going to be showing two different descendants and how these two different stats kind of scale with them, and hopefully it helps illustrate what's going to be the best option for you. So right now I have my Freyna, and in a moment I will also be going over my Esiemo. So like I said, my Freyna, I am going to do something very bare bones. We're going to go in with 0 modifications right now, and we'll just kind of see what damage looks like, and then we'll show you kind of what the differences are between skill power and skill power modifier. So I'm only going to be using my first ability, my Q. This is just the Molotov, or the, Molly, and it's ticking for 1,423 damage, and it also ticks 6 times. So again, this is with no modifications whatsoever, and that comes out to like 8,000 and something damage. So now let's try and adding a couple mods just to see what happens. So first, let's start off. So one of the first mistakes that I made was investing in something like Toxic Specialist. So I was thinking that Toxic Skill Power, oh, that's going to scale exceptionally well. All of Freyna's abilities do toxic damage, right? So again, this is our showcase of skill power specifically for toxic skills. So remember that we were doing 1,423 damage a tick. Now it's only a 400 damage increase roughly. That's not really that good for that amount of investment, right? So let's try something different. So let's try doing something like, where is it? Where is my power increase? Okay, this one is just a basic skill power, so not necessarily related to toxic. And as you might expect, this is going to do even less damage than that Toxic Specialist. But what if we do something with skill power modification instead? So what I have here is, I guess there's a couple of things that you could use. You can use Technician, which is skill power modifiers. But what I'm going to use on Freyna specifically for this demonstration is Tech Specialist. This has a higher modifier than just Technician, I believe. And all of Freyna's primary damage is tech, they're all tech skills, so all of her poison is tech except for her second ability. So now that we just have this one modifier, again, it's only a 19% increase here. Let's see what it does now. So remember, at our maximum, we were doing 1,800 damage a tick. Now it's doing 4,000 damage a tick. That's a lot higher. So why is that happening? So if we look at Freyna's like scaling here, you have her poison and her room 0 trauma, right? So basically that skill power times that skill power times whatever. So in this case with the poison, it says skill power times 60%. That 60% is your modifier. That is going to increase how much you scale with your skill power. So it's going to increase how much you actually scale with this stat here. Basically, because that modifier is so low for her damage over time effect, again, so only 60%, you're not really getting a lot of benefit if you just try to increase your skill power. You're only going to get 60% of the benefit from that skill power. So it would be a little bit more worthwhile and more bang for your buck to increase the spell power modifier, and that's going to go a lot further distance. And so basically this just seems to play really well into any sort of like low damage, kind of like frequent attacker. So like a dot class basically. I'm pretty sure Blair probably has some related effects with his burn statuses, and I think some characters like Bunny might have some as well with electrocution. Yeah, that one. And I think also her like pulsing damage might not have the highest scaling. Really, I think every single Descendant has different percentages, so you're really gonna just want to check to see what your scaling is to try to figure out what the higher priority for your skill power versus skill modifier investment should be. One other thing though I want to show with Freyna specifically is, so we know now that the power modifier is more beneficial to her, but one other thing that is also extremely beneficial for her is going to be skill extension, and you probably know why. So before we were only getting 6 ticks per use of this molly. Now we're getting up to 7 ticks, and if my math is correct, I think that's about a 15 roughly % damage increase just by adding on that other skill extension modifier or skill duration increase. So I don't know, I think it's really something that I made that mistake of. As you can see here with Toxic Specialist, I had already invested some points into it. It wasn't like a ton, but it was still enough that in the early game it kind of set me back, and there were definitely a lot of times when I was very confused as to why it felt like my Freyna just was not doing any damage, and it's because I wasn't putting enough points into the skill power modifier. So one other thing I want to look at though here is, again, I want to look at my Esiemo, so we have something else to compare it against. This Descendant, so like you can see here, his skill power is a much higher modifier or scaling modifier than what Freyna's poison was. So on this first ability, it's a 429 or 407% damage increase based off of your skill power. And if I'm going to increase the modifier by like 19% or something like that versus increasing my raw skill power, because my skill power scaling is already so high on this specific Descendant, I'm going to get much more benefit from increasing my skill power. So let's do just a quick demonstration. I will purge everything I have here. First, I'll use a basic technician here, and we'll see what my first skill does. So the first damage instance here is 6,000 or 64,000 damage. Now, if we take a power increase instead, again, that was 64,000 damage or 60,000, something like that. Now with this, it's up to 70,000. So you can see that it's a much higher increase for just applying the power scaling versus the power modifier scaling for this type of Descendant. But on a final note though, you're still probably going to get a lot of scaling benefits from investing in both skill power and your skill power modifier, because again, they kind of play hand in hand. It's just more of a description of what you should invest in first, because I think a lot of us are starting to run into some resource issues. So just really try to avoid the mistake of investing in the wrong modifiers or the wrong power-up scaling tools for your character. And yeah, I really hope that this video kind of helped illustrate those differences. And stay tuned for more First Descendant content coming in the near future. If this video was helpful to you, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. But this was GooberTroy saying I'll catch you in the next one, and thank you for watching.